Hey, welcome to another episode of the Fit Growth Machine podcast. I'm Brian Roisentul, your host, and today I'm going to interview Mike De Santis. He's the Director of Business Operations and partner at Doris Dev, a product development agency that helps brands and entrepreneurs bring product from concept all the way through fulfillment to end customer. Before talking to him, let me tell you that this episode is brought to you by BSR Digital. I mean, we get it. Acquisition costs are going up. There's lack of tracking. Attribution is revenue nuts, and audience sizes aren't are getting smaller after the iOS 14 update. And if that wasn't enough, there are other factors such as a recession and supply chain issues, making it harder than ever to grow your e-commerce brand. That's why we need to understand that it's really important to level up the marketing and design a solid strategy, as what used to work doesn't anymore. Here at BSR Digital, we have been helping countless e-commerce brands that wanted to scale their business to the next level through paid ads and email marketing for over a decade. So if you want to learn more about us, please visit us at bsrdigital.com, and you can also email us at hello@bsrdigital.com. Now, as promised, I have Mike here with me. Hey, man, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Brian. How's it going?
Pretty good. What about you?
You can't complain. Can't complain. Good start to the new year. Lots of people
Yeah,
getting projects off the ground. So
that's great to hear. I will ask you about your story in a sec, but let me tell you that I'm super excited about this one because we typically discuss customer acquisition, customer retention, paid ads, SEO, affiliate, email marketing, and I know we are going to touch base briefly on those in a sec, but this is a different interview from all the ones we had so far on the podcast. And this is the third season, by the way, for everyone listening or watching. And this is about what nobody thinks about when we are talking about marketing and all that jazz, which is the product development. So if you have an e-commerce brand, you for sure are interested in this. So stay tuned because this is going to be amazing. No pressure, Mike. No pressure.
yeah, don't worry about it. I mean, listen, at the end of the day, you need a product to market, right? And so do all the brands out there. So if there's not a good product development process in place, it makes your guys' job a lot harder to do. So
Exactly. So please go ahead and tell everyone listening or watching about your story.
yeah, for sure. So appreciate the intro. I think you covered off on a fair amount. I'm at Doris Dev now, Director of Business Operations. I started my career in banking and realized pretty quickly that the suit and tie life was not for me. Made a jump to a startup called Raiden, which was a suitcase company back in 2016, 2017, competitive with Away. Helped set up the supply chain there, manage operations, manage customer experience. I left Raiden in about 2017 and started to freelance. I worked at a number of different branding agencies, helped with kind of strategy through visual identity, even into web design and development for a number of different brands, and then rejoined forces with Doris Dev. Justin, our CEO, and myself actually worked together at Raiden. So rejoined forces with them in 2019 to help assist with the launch of a brand called Canopy, which we'll get to a little bit later, and then came on full time in 2020 to help support growing the agency that is Doris Dev. So yeah, I mean, currently my role is primarily focused on new business development, scoping projects out, and really like leading projects end to end, right? So anybody that comes in the door, or at least most people that come in the door, I'm the first person they meet, and I'm the last person they say goodbye to once they have finished goods in hand. So yeah.
That's great. So what do you guys do at Doris Dev? What does product development mean in the first
Yeah,
place?
for sure. And I'll say Doris has like grown and evolved over time. So I'll give you what Doris Dev is currently.
Okay.
Doris Dev's a full stack product team for hire, right? What that means is we help entrepreneurs take product concept from inception all the way through fulfillment and customer, and kind of all the steps that go in between there. We were born out of our two co-founders going and embedding themselves full-time at these D2C two different D2C brands, standing up the supply chains, recognizing oh, this is a black box for most founders. People don't know how to get product made. They don't have the connections. They don't have the technical capabilities to do the work. So why don't we templatize this process and go help them? And that's kind of how Doorstep was born. The we have three primary buckets of work that we do here. They're split across our two offices. We have offices in New York City, in Dumbo, Brooklyn, and in Hong Kong. About 35 people on the team currently. And the way that those offices are split up, we have the bulk of our engineering team here in New York. That's mechanical, electrical, firmware engineering. Some extensions of that team sit in the Hong Kong office as well. The entirety of the industrial design team sits here. And then we have freight and ops team members in both offices as well. So the three buckets of work that I mentioned, bucket one is industrial design, right? So that's where somebody comes to us with a concept. They say, I have a general aesthetic that I'm trying to meet. Ideally, they come to us with, a fleshed out design brief outlining, hey, here are the products that I've found inspiring that have come out in the last few years. They don't even need to be in, the same space that you're in. Just like, what do you find inspiring about it and why? Equally as helpful, what do you hate? Right? Like, is there a product out there that really you hate the way that it works? It's super finicky or fidgety. That's all good information to know as well. Ideally, they have a brand identity fleshed out because it's super important to have that foundation to build. How do you take the visual identity of a brand and build it into the product identity of a brand at the end of the day? Those processes generally take 6 to 12 weeks, depending on complexity of the product. 6 weeks, something, relatively simple, 12 weeks for something more complicated that maybe involves some connectivity or something along those lines. And during that process, what we're going to do is we're going to do a bunch of upfront strategy work to really set the foundation to build on top of, right? And during that process, we're going to go out in conjunction with your brief and find things that we're inspired by based on, kind of the information that you've provided to us up front. And we're going to come back to you and we're going to say, hey, here's the potential paths forward that we think that we should take. Once we're all aligned, we're going to step into sketching, right? That's where our ID team is going to go out and really blue sky the project and come back to you with, 3 to 7 concepts that we think are good paths forward based on, kind of the agreed upon starting point. And over the course of the engagement, we're going to narrow and winnow that down until we have like a really refined final product. We're ideally going to prototype that product as well, so you have something that you can actually hold in your hands and feel really good about. The final output of that is kind of a tech pack that is ready to be handed off to our engineering team and start phase 2 of work. Phase 2, we call supply chain setup or new product introduction. That's where now we're starting to pull in members from the Hong Kong team and some of the members from the team that worked with you on the ID side of things in New York. We're going to go out and we're going to source a bunch of potential manufacturing partners that we think would be a good fit based on all the criterion that we've developed during the course of the industrial design phase. We're going to work with you to identify the top manufacturer that we pull out of that initial process and ultimately make a recommendation to you and say, we think this is the best possible partner. It's our client's decision at the end of the day. It's their relationship in the long run. So we're just going to try and guide the horse to water on that one, but can't make them drink. During that process, the engineering team is going to kick off design for manufacturing work. So that's translating the CAD that we produced during the industrial design phase of work into actual manufacturable 3D files. Once we've decided on a vendor that we want to step forward with, we're going to start doing some prototyping with that vendor and say, okay, here are the changes that we need to make based on the feedback that we're receiving from the supplier. Certain parts of the design need to be tweaked minorly to make sure that all of this can come together smoothly in mass production. Once we get through that phase, we're going to step into a tooling kickoff. So that's spinning up a custom mold that is going to be used in the actual mass production process to produce the finished goods that you're looking to make at the end of the day. We're going to get a number of samples off of that tool after it's created to make sure that everything is up to spec and standard that we've scoped out. And then generally we're going to step into like a pre-production run. So that's, the first 200-300 units that are going to come off the line. We're going to get those in hand, make sure that everything is running smoothly during that process, and we feel really good about it. Once that's completed, we'll place a purchase order, step into that first production run, and then pack finished goods in boxes and get them headed your way towards a 3PL. That process generally takes 4 to 9 months, depending on complexity of the product. And also worth noting, doesn't need to be full custom. Like if you're looking for something off the shelf and you just need support in getting that spun up, maybe you want to support in putting some custom decoration on it or a logo, etc. We can also support on that front. And then the last piece of the puzzle is really just freight, like getting finished goods from China or Southeast Asia, wherever they're being produced, and shipping them out to your 3PL. We can also oversee 3PLs on behalf of some of our clients that are in the earlier stages of their business. And yeah, that's kind of it in a nutshell. So everything from concepting through fulfillment to customer.
So there's good news for all of you guys listening or watching this. It is that you have just provided the audience with a lot of information of many of the things you do and you cover. And the good thing is that you guys do it for them, right? And you guide the process. You have the experience, you have the tools, you have the team. But if you do it on your own, and I'm talking to you guys listening, right? It's something, I mean, we have discussed on this very same podcast, like some inventions done by, the founders that took many, many years because they didn't know how to go about it. They didn't know how to find the right vendors. They have had many trial and errors with many vendors and many moving parts along the way that made it like probably not the best process ever, sort of a headache, I'd say.
Sure.
And they have told and I mean mentioned many stories. In this case, we just described, Mike, is great because you take care of the whole thing. It's like I compare it to building a house, more or less, right? You do the
Yeah.
initial sketches and then you draw some things where you want the kitchen, blah blah blah, and then you do some prototypes and then the 3D version or whatever. Then you do the next step and the next step until you actually build it. You find the providers, or the supplies chain. And in this case, it's a process that if you do it on your own, probably it's not going to look like a house, right? So in this case, when you find companies like you can
Yeah.
do what you do best as a founder, right? You can take care of the unit economics, you can take care of the customer experience, but not you don't need to know how to do everything, right? As a founder. And sometimes
Of course.
the pressure the founders feel.
No, I think that's I love that analogy. It's not dissimilar from building a house. And I don't know very many people who would take on that challenge, which, leads me to the question, like, why are you trying to do this yourself? You're happy to hire experts to come in and build your brand and run your digital ads, right? Because they're in it every day. And, that's kind of what we do here. We're in it every single day. We've also set up hundreds of supply chains at this point, which means we know what the trials and tribulations look like. Part of the supply chain process, like setting up any supply chain, means fixing problems as they arise, right? Like there is constant troubleshooting in any and all supply chains, and having a team on your side that has already gone through a similar process or the exact same problem, right, that we can look to avoid again for a future supply chain is super valuable from my perspective. All that said, you can definitely do it yourself, right? Like it is possible. Just like it's possible for founders to take their digital advertising and run with it and, do a good enough job. You can definitely go through all the phases that I just mentioned to you and like execute. I believe that there are plenty of competent founders out there to do it. But at the end of the day, like the way that I think about, building brands and starting brands, particularly in like today's world where maybe you don't have a bunch of full-time employees, the prerogative should be hire experts in narrow and specific fields who you can pull in to execute at an incredibly high level on those narrow and specific fields. So, having a team like Doris behind you can definitely be helpful in that process.
Yeah, plus, as a founder, you're putting your entire focus in the activities that you actually need to, right? Again, building a brand, building a successful customer experience, and all the stuff. But in this case, I wanted to mention something that in case you guys listening or watching don't realize, and this is a comment as a marketer, right? Many times I chat with founders or marketing directors, and all they see is, I don't know, the what happens in the ad account, right? The ROAS, or what happens in the with their KPIs. And don't get me wrong, that's important, but they don't analyze beyond that point. And many times the problem is not there. The problem might be in the offer, in the pricing, but also in the product. There are many unhappy customers, or there might be many unhappy customers, in your brand, that if you listen to them and build something better with better vendors, better quality fabrics, or whatever, that's something that will help you grow ultimately. And it's something that you can have the best content creator out there, you can have the best marketers out there, and yes, you might get away with selling more, and having more one-time customers, but that will be it. They won't come back. All you will get will be negative reviews, and nobody will buy from you anymore, right? So that's why
Sure.
it's really important for you guys to pay attention into this process.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned, right, like what our founders focus on. They're focused on like building this community and building this customer base, right? You're spending all of this time, energy, and effort to do things like just get a first sale from a customer, but then you're building an email list, right? And you're spending time, energy, and effort in building out these email flows. And everybody knows how valuable a large email list can become, but it only becomes valuable if you can retain customers, right? And I think it's actually really interesting. There's as businesses grow, a retention function gets built into them. You're hiring a retention marketing manager, right? You're thinking through, what does subscription look like? What's a loyalty program look like? All of those things. But at the end of the day, from our perspective, retention starts on the factory floor, right? Like, if you're not producing quality product that customers want to tell their friends about, that they want to come back to you and purchase again and again and again, then all that effort's for nothing, right? It's one thing to spend $50 to acquire a customer in Facebook or Google. But what's that worth if they never come back and purchase from you again, right? If you can get them to come back a million times because they love product that you guys are producing, at the end of the day, like, that's a big win in our book.
I gotta ask, have you received any crazy request for a product development? Or what's the craziest product request that you have received, if any?
I mean, there are definitely a lot of crazy things that come across the desk. I think that there's been a trend away from like inventing things, right? It's been much more like, hey, I want to make modifications and changes to an existing product that we perceive there's a pain point with. So like, as far as like really crazy out there things go, it tends to be things that are like super small runs, which like Doris Dev is not well suited for. It's like, I want to make 100 like walls of lockers that you can only unlock if you do X, Y, or Z, and you're putting your phone in there. Like, that is something that happens from time to time. But I'll say, like, the way that D2C has been going, right? Wave one of D2C was very much, um, we're going to address existing pain points in legacy product, right? Even if it's just Warby, right? Like, Warby addressing the Luxottica monopoly and the cost of frames, like, being absolutely ridiculous and absurd, or Casper putting a mattress in a box and like making that entire process a lot simpler, and not needing to strap a mattress onto the roof of your borrowed the SUV that you borrowed from a buddy. Like, simplifying the customer experience was very much like the early stage prerogative. And now, what we're seeing is people continuing to try and pick off, like, what are the legacy products that exist out there and how can we make them better. There are like simple pain points that you might have in an everyday process that are worth iterating on. Canopy's a good example of that, which we can get into. But the next layer of the next layer of that, and what we're seeing a ton of, is like, how do we become as sustainable as possible as a business? And like, that bar for where you need to start is continually getting ratcheted up, right? It used to be, oh, we can have foam inserts in our packaging, and now, like, if you put foam inserts in your packaging, I guarantee you're going to start getting negative reviews from customers immediately. It's going to be a horrible first experience, right? So simple things like that, all the way up to, okay, I have a product that is a consumable, right? I have a skincare product that people are running through, and then they're throwing out the packaging every single time, and they're throwing out the pump every single time. It's like, how do you shift customer sentiment around that? How do you change the entire experience so that it's not throw this entire piece of packaging out every single time, throw this pump out every single time? Let's reduce, reuse, refill, right? Like, let's build something permanent that lives forever. So, maybe less recyclable, maybe equally as recyclable as any of those permanent products that you already have on your counter. But then let's make sure the way in which you're replenishing that product is incredibly sustainable, and whatever the replenishment packaging is compostable if possible, but at bare minimum, like, widely recyclable on the macro level. So that's where, like, a lot of work is shifting towards, a lot of really interesting things coming down the pipe as far as material sciences go, and paths forward for brands to explore, like, working towards meaningful sustainability goals and not just greenwashing.
Yeah, 100%. So I know, going back to the example or the analogy of building a house, when you work in the marketing space, or even when you do some tasks from your desk, it's pretty comfortable. You can see some things, but when you go to where the workers are, and building the house, you guys are in the trenches, building things. And, if you haven't received any crazy requests, probably you have seen some crazy stuff. I don't know, in the process, right? I don't know if you have seen any crazy things happening in the back end, the
For sure.
manufacturing
For sure.
process.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that, is nice about Doris, and things shifted due to COVID, but we definitely, now that China's opened back up, the Hong Kong team is generally going down to the factory floor, right? We're making sure we're trying to mitigate risk as much as possible in
Yeah.
any of these processes, because last thing you want is finished goods coming off the line not up to standard, and then having to rerun that entire thing, and having an entire negotiation with the factory to get that done. But I always tell people, like, finished goods coming off the line, that does not mean things are done, right? You still have to now get the finished goods from Southeast Asia or China and get it into your 3PL and get it checked into your 3PL. And there are risks that sit in that stage of the supply chain as well. So back in 2016, 2017 at Raiden, we were sold out for a few months coming out of the backside of a really successful holiday season. Um, and we had a container on the water waiting for it to arrive. Very excited to start fulfilling orders to customers again and letting the wait list know, hey, we have product back in stock. The warehouse opens the container, and I get a call and a bunch of pictures sent to my phone of a bloody mess inside of a container. And a couple of cats had gotten into the container prior to the doors closing and fought each other in said container. We ended up having to have a hazmat team come in, clean and sanitize all of the box. We had to get rid of every single box. We had to tear everything apart, and then, like, repack the suitcases themselves into fresh boxes. It was a total fiasco. So, like, from my perspective, it's like, it's not done until it's done, right? You don't have the supply chain is not completed until you have finished goods in your warehouse ready to have a label slapped on it and sent out to customer. So, and I mean, honestly, even after it gets picked up by UPS, you never know what UPS can do to a package. Anybody who works in CX or has ever manned their CX inbox has seen some crazy things on that front.
Yeah, for sure. That's a fun story, by the way. So, talking about innovation and product development, I know you are also working in the creation of a brand called Canopy, right?
Yeah.
It's about.
Yeah, so I was on the founding team of a company called Canopy. We actually incubated it out of Doris Dev here. So myself and the two co-founders of Doris Dev, as well as Eric Nayer, our CMO, who we brought on, right around when we were getting things moving on the Canopy side of things. Basically, it's a beauty wellness brand. Our hero product is a humidifier. We basically came to the understanding that, like, there are a lot of existing pain points with most humidifiers in the market. They're really hard to clean. You have to manually clean them by hand. You can't throw them in the dishwasher. And that was like the primary thing that we really like wanted to innovate around. And then the more we started to like peel back layers on the product, we were like, oh, there's so much here than we thought initially, right? um Most people think about humidifiers as just like an appliance, right? I got sick, my parents put it in my bedroom when I was a kid, and like, if I have allergies, maybe I'm running a humidifier, but that's kind of the end of the way a lot of people think about humidifier usage. um what we actually learned, and this came as a function of um Lucas, one of our co-founders, watching his girlfriend like maniacally cleaning her humidifier every week, was that there's a large cohort of people that use this as a beauty skincare hack, right? They run it every single night as a part of their skincare routine. It increases the efficacy of their skincare product. It helps keep them moisturized. Excuse me. And stops their skin from drying out, chapped lips, etc. Particularly in the winter time, right? I like in New York, it's been a very, very warm winter. But for the most part, especially if you're living in an old pre-war building, but like you dry out very quickly inside of these apartments in the city. The other thing is a lot of like the blue teardrop humidifiers that shoot mist out of the top, you're supposed to put distilled water in them, which means if you're a New Yorker or you live in a city, the expectation is that you're going to the grocery store and you're lugging back bottles of distilled water to pour into your humidifier. We also thought that was pretty ridiculous. So that was kind of like how the impetus for developing Canopy. The way that we worked around both those things is, one, we designed it to make sure it was completely dishwasher safe, and two, there's a paper wick that sits inside the humidifier that basically absorbs the water, and the water gets evaporated off of. One, that makes it so you don't need to put distilled water in your tank, which is convenient. And two, it creates a very convenient subscription model for our business. So we have an ongoing subscription model. Most people that purchase a humidifier sign up for a subscription where they're receiving a new filter every 6 weeks or so. And we've continued to build the brand, launched in October of 2020 with just the four of us. And now we've got about 9 people full-time on that team as well, and have a pretty large subscriber base. Have a bunch of new products coming down the pipe that are in the beauty wellness in-home space. Yeah, it's been an exciting time.
That's great. I mean, I got a lot of questions.
Yeah.
Probably we won't have time to cover them all, but I will start by the top relevant ones. First, congrats on the launch of this product. I think it's great. And I always love the fact that you have an angle for an existing product. You improved it and you gave it a different use case scenario in a well-defined industry and in a thriving industry such as beauty. So that's great. The question mainly is, you mentioned subscription, right? And this is something we have discussed here in many interviews, the importance of, using subscription if your business can leverage them. So in this case, could you please go a little bit more in depth with regards to the tools you use?
Yep.
What's the reasoning behind doing a subscription model, the ups and downs? If you have tracked how much it has increased your LTV, etc.
Yeah, of course. So I think to start, right, the way that we think about D2C in general is like, you need to figure out some type of recurring revenue model and a recurring touch point with a customer, right? And if you're not doing that, you're not building the type of long-term relationship that you need to have a successful brand over the long run. Going back to what I mentioned, like if you acquire a customer for $50 and they never buy from you again, sure, great, you got that first sale, but I don't know that that's $50 well spent. Um, so we started with basically only the need to have subscription, right? And the way I think about it is there are need to have subscriptions and there are nice to have subscriptions. But the need to have subscription is you need a new filter because, one, it's going to degrade over time, right? It's going to pull impurities out of your water. You're going to literally see it in the filter. It's going to change colors. It's going to get gross. And it's part of the reason that Canopy is an incredibly clean humidifier, is because you're constantly refreshing that filter and making sure that it does stay clean and you're not spewing mold and gross things into your air. So we started with just the filter. You need the filter to use the humidifier. If you're not replenishing the filter the humidifier is going to stop working. So, that's the need to have component. And in our mind, we definitely thought about it. Like, there is a little bit of a risk here. Like, if people don't attach this thing, then, we have a challenge, but that ended up working out. We really have continued to like build that customer base and nurture that customer base as well, because they continue to come back every single holiday season. We see a large number of them coming back around and like buying and gifting for friends. So that's like a big piece of the puzzle for us. Our attribution survey, for example, on the end of our website, post purchase, word of mouth is the number one way in which people come to Canopy, which is just incredible as far as we're concerned. Like, the fact that we've like been able to build that loyal customer base is very much a function of the subscription, as far as I see it. And then we built a nice to have subscription, which is our filter plus aroma subscription. So the humidifier itself also doubles as an aroma diffuser. And that's done a couple things for us. One, you get a filter with every single one of those as well. So if you ever want to downgrade, you can just downgrade into the filter only subscription. And, it's not an uncommon action that happens kind of in the relationship with the customer. Sometimes people will upgrade and then downgrade because they, have too many aromas, or they don't want any aromas this month, whatever that looks like. But it allows us to, one, charge customers more every 6 weeks or so, and two, it's been a great partnerships lever for us, right? Which is, I think, a really interesting piece of a subscription component. If you can figure out a way to bake partnerships into it, fortunately for Canopy, we're very non-offensive to a lot of other D2C brands. Like, people aren't like, oh, are they going to buy conditioner from Pros this month, or are they going to buy a humidifier from Canopy, right? Like, you're still going to buy your conditioner, even if you're thinking about buying a Canopy this month. So, Pros is a great example. We did a partnership with them in 2021 where we co-developed a set of aromas, and then co-market that product to their customer base and our customer base, right? And we try to do that 3 or 4 times a year. So basically every other cycle, you're getting like a custom kit developed with another cool brand that you've either heard of or you haven't heard of. And it just like brings this whole surprise and delight moment to the overall experience for the customer. I'll say we're in the process of working on building a build-a-box functionality so that customers can pick and choose the aromas that they like the most. Obviously, it's a pretty intensive lift, and there's a lot of things that need to happen in order to make that all come together in like a really smooth, cohesive way. It's all built on Recharge currently. We do use an additional app for Recharge, which is probably a little less well known, called Automate, that allows us to more smoothly set up custom workflows within Recharge. So, if somebody gets the Pros aroma kit 1 month, and then the next month it's the Curie aroma kit, we need a system to like smoothly transition those people to the next SKU in the sequence. So those are the processes that we've been using to build it out. And then as far as LTV goes, it's pretty clear, like in our data, and we have this all built out in Dacity, that, sure, at first purchase, the people who don't subscribe, they're not getting passed along a discount, right? When somebody subscribes, they get a $25 discount on the humidifier or a $15 discount on the humidifier, depending on subscription type. So obviously at first purchase, those people that are just buying as a standalone one-time purchase, the LTV is a little bit higher, but basically within 6 to 8 months, which, in Canopy terms is 4-ish shipments of replenishments, we're seeing the LTV start to outpace those customers that are standalone purchasers, and then that continues to deviate over time. Even our oldest cohort now, which is, October 2020, so we're talking 28 months old, are still 40+% subscribed. So it tends to be a very sticky subscription, which is another great piece of the puzzle, right? Like, if you build that relationship and that trust and that touch point over and over again with that customer, they're going to stay loyal to you. So yeah, that's kind of it.
That's great. I mean, there was a lot of value that you added to the audience and to me as well. 2 things from everything you said was interesting, but 2 things stands out. One, the importance of having an offer or multiple offers on the back end and not relying only on the first purchase, because otherwise it's super tough nowadays to build a healthy brand, right? Nowadays. And the second one is the I had in my mind. Now I forgot, but I'll remember in a sec. But yeah, I remember. It's the importance of collaborating with other brands, right?
Right.
In fact, Shopify released its annual report for the commerce space. I mean, with the top trends for 2023, early January, and one of the main things they said is the importance of collaborations
Yep.
because now it's more important than ever, and plus, it's a great way of tapping into the other brand's audience as well, right? It's a very interesting way. You can collaborate with another brand, you can collaborate with content creators, influencers, but I think all of them have a certain, reason to be. There's a place and time for all of them. So those two things, I think, from everything you said, which again was all interesting, those two things, um, it's something that we have been discussing here as well, and it's important for everyone listening or watching that you actually take action on that, right?
Yeah, and like a good example of that for Canopy even is, we launched in the beauty wellness space, like very squarely have a customer base that's women aged 25 to 40. Um, and we had a hunch that new and expecting parents was going to be a good path forward for us, but we didn't really unlock that truthfully until we partnered with a company called Lalo, which is like a baby accessory brand, right? They sell high chairs and play tables and coloring accessories and play gyms. And partnering with them like really unlocked an entire new cohort of customers that was previously untapped for us, right? So experimenting and exploring with like other brands who have already like established credibility in the space is super important. We can say we're the best humidifier for beauty and wellness, but like, why are we credible, right? We're credible because we've aligned ourselves with other brands who have already established credibility. We're credible because we've, worked with Sephora, and now, you can purchase us on Sephora.com, right? Those things are part of building the brand story and like really defining yourself as a brand who can be trusted and is credible in the space. And then ideally, Canopy can be a vehicle for helping other brands, establish credibility as well if the founders are doing cool things, right? And they really care and are trying to carve out that niche in whatever it is that they're doing in particular. Yeah, I mean, I think there's enough room for everybody to eat, right? At the end of the day. So
Yeah. So in under 1 minute, if you want, what are you guys doing at Canopy for your customer acquisition and retention efforts?
yeah, I mean, primarily still focused on Facebook and Google. I'll say those are the two biggest channels for us for sure. Um, but we are experimenting with TikTok, hoping to, kind of figure out what pockets of efficiency look like there and how to double down. I'll say audience augmentation platforms have been a big part of our strategy in building up Facebook in particular. We work with a company called Faraday. We're experimenting with Black Crow and Disco and Proxima and figuring out how to make sure that we can scale spend more effectively and efficiently over time. And then on the retention side of things, we hired in a retention marketing manager last summer. She's been crushing it, really like supercharging our email and SMS approaches. We also are partnered with a company called Wonderkind that has really helped exponentially grow our email and SMS lists. So, it's really like a matter of unfolding all of this stuff over time and heading into the summer, hopefully some new initiatives getting kicked off on both those fronts as well.
That's awesome. And what metrics do you track? I mean, I know
Yeah.
you have the first purchase, so many people might be thinking about the ROAS, but is that it, or do you track anything else more important than the ROAS?
Yeah, I mean, definitely ROAS. I'll say like our CAC targets are incredibly aggressive. That's the feedback that we get all the time. But like at the end of the day, we're really trying to push it and get the most out of, limited budget. The prerogative here is build a brand that can last for a long time and not burn money. Particularly given the fundraising environment out there. Um, and then beyond that, like we're really deep into site metrics and like tracking where people are falling off on the web experience, right? Because we know the site converts really well. It's just a matter of getting them to the product page and how do we minimize bounce rates on site? How do we make sure that people are stickier, staying on page for longer, so that they can gather all the information that they need to ultimately hit that add to cart button and check out. And then beyond that, it's our churn rate, right? I would say that's one of the biggest pieces for us too. Keeping and maintaining a large subscriber base means we need to keep eyes on when are people falling off, make assumptions about why they're falling off, and then test into what are the things that we can do to try and, stem the bleeding, I guess is a good way to think about it. Because even if you have a healthy churn rate, you're still bleeding customers. So that's kind of, those are kind of the primary metrics we're focused on.
Churn rate, it's something I would say really, really important to measure. And most or many e-commerce brands, I would say, they don't even know what their churn rate is. I would say service-based companies like agencies or other type of companies providing a service, they know, right? If you have a subscription, of course you should know what your churn rate is. But even if you don't have a subscription model, you should know. I like the other day, for example, we did an audit for a company in the beauty space.
Yeah.
They have a replenishable product, right? So it makes sense. They have a high customer retention rate, and they were saying, "Oh, we have a decent ROAS, we have a decent website conversion rate. We don't know what's going on." And we said, you have a super low customer retention rate. So what? Well, think about the churn rate as think of the churn rate as the opposite of the customer retention rate. It's not exactly like that if you don't have a subscription model, because not every customer needs to come back mandatorily every month to call it successful, right? Or to consider it successful. But many brands don't even pay attention to the fact that many people are not coming back when they should.
Of course. I mean, like at the end of the day, if you're just acquiring a customer for one purchase, you're just throwing money out the window, right? But build a relationship and build a community. I think that's the key pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah. So Mike, you've been great. I really appreciate you coming to the show. I really value everything that you mentioned. I think you delivered a lot of value to the audience. But before we go, I wanted to ask you a question to wrap up. Do you
Yeah.
have any mentor or anyone you follow that helps you get that, inspiration and motivation to keep going and building great things?
Yeah, for sure. I used to work with Mike Silverman, current CEO of a company called Flip, has invested a lot of time, energy, and effort into me and helping me become a better person and a better entrepreneur. So yeah, shout out to him. I think mentorship is incredibly important, and finding those people who will provide you that type of advice and tough love when you need it is super important.
Awesome. Where can people go to learn more about you and these two companies?
Yeah. DorisDev.com. Just drop us a note. We'll reach out within a day or two. It'll probably be me. And then Canopy, getcanopy.co if you are in the market for a humidifier or a diffuser. We're go-to shop for those things. So yeah, hit us up there. Can also reach me on LinkedIn. My hair's not as long for anybody watching in my LinkedIn profile, so don't be alarmed. It's still the same Mike De Santis.
Awesome. As always, for everyone listening, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any other platform, but you're not on our website, please head on over to fitgrowthmachine.com, find the episode, and there you will find all the resources mentioned by Mike, including these links that he just mentioned. Mike, it was a pleasure to have you here. Thanks for doing it.
For sure. Thanks for having me, Brian. It's a lot of fun.